Okay, the training today is going to be on the Stokes Basket. Here what I have is all the equipment that's necessary to tie a patient in the Stokes Basket. Let's first, so I have some webbing to tie the patient in. We tie this webbing, a Swiss seat or some kind of seat harness on the patient itself anytime you're going to secure someone in a Stokes Basket. And then I have two 25-foot sections of webbing that's going to be the diamond lashing that will actually lash the patient in. I also have a backboard, and the use of the backboard is all dependent on the patient's injuries. If the patient has spinal injuries based on mechanism of injury, then you need to put them in a backboard and secure them properly prior to putting them in the Stokes Basket. But if you have a situation where someone was on a high angle situation where they became heat exhaustion or something like that with no spinal injuries, there's no requirement to use the backboard. So using the backboard in the Stokes is all dependent on the patient's injuries, okay? So anyway, I do have a backboard here just to show you the fact that it's optional whether we use this or not. It's all dependent on what's wrong with the patient. It's not required to use the backboard. So I'm going to go ahead and set this off to the side. And then, okay, I'm going to set this down. Now, here's a Stokes Basket, and we have the Stokes Basket on the ladder truck. It's a little bit different than this, but this is the foot end of the Stokes Basket. Here's the head end, and you see they have a foot plate on this particular Stokes, and then they have straps to strap it in. We can never rely on these straps unless you're going low angle. In other words, you're going a situation where someone's in water or something like that, and it's not necessary to lash them in. But anytime you have someone at an elevation that's going to be required to be lowered via a ladder, via the aerial device, or just by rope mechanical advantage systems or lowering systems, you need to have the diamond lashing system in place. Never lower a patient with just these straps, unless it's a low angle situation where you're carrying them down a slope or something like that, then you don't need to do the diamond lashing. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and do the diamond lashing, and typically the diamond lashing is joining two 25-foot sections of webbing together, starting at the foot of the patient and progressing up to the head and lashing them in. Remember, the patient has to have a Swiss seat on them as a secondary means of belay, okay, as their safety. All right, so we do a primary main line and a secondary line, and that's it. And then we do the diamond lashing system, and then we can lower them. So next video, we're going to demonstrate actually lashing the patient in. All right, thanks. We're going to do a demonstration on doing a diamond lashing of a patient in the Stokes Basket. This patient, we don't necessarily have a backboard on the patient, but depending on the patient's injury, you could put a backboard on. In this case, we're not going to use a backboard, but it depends on the patient's injury. What we're going to do first is we're going to take two 25-foot sections of webbing, and then we're going to tie a water knot in the webbing, and then the other attendant is going to go ahead and use the straps on the Stokes Basket, go ahead and do that, and lash them in. Remember, on a high angle situation, you cannot rely on these straps to tie a patient into the Stokes Basket. You have to use the diamond webbing system. On a low angle event, like carrying them up a slope or something like that, you can use these straps. But high angle event, you want to make sure you use the diamond webbing. So first they're going to start at the foot of the patient. They're going to do a girth hitch at the foot of the patient, and then each attendant's going to get about 25 feet of webbing. And then they're going to diamond lash the webbing all the way up from the foot all the way to the head. They're going to go ahead and put some stirrups in for the feet, and the reason for the stirrups is to keep the patient from sliding down out of the basket. So you have to have stirrups, otherwise the patient is not secure. One thing I didn't mention, and we didn't do in this case, is a Swiss seat. We would have already put a Swiss seat or some kind of a seat or harness system independent of the lashing on the patient with a secondary belay line, and we didn't demonstrate that. Everybody should know how to do a Swiss seat. And so here he is, he's doing the girth hitch in. He's got the girth hitch set, and then he's going to come up the patient and do the lashing. This should take less than 5 minutes to complete, and here we're moving right along. Okay, now each attendant is doing the stirrups on the patient. And the stirrups can be, if you're in a hurry, you don't have to get the fancy stirrups. The goal behind the stirrups is to keep the patient from sliding down on the stretcher, okay? And what you could do is, if you do your Swiss seat, you can go ahead and form your Swiss seat on the patient, and then you can tie your Swiss seat off to the lower side rails, and that'll keep the patient from also shifting up and down. So your Swiss seat is also used as an anchor point also. And now what they're doing is around the lower rails, underneath the main rail, they're doing the round turns. And the reason why you don't want them on the rails, because you don't want the webbing to rub against any kind of sharp surface where it possibly will cut the webbing. So you want to do your round turns. That's good. And as they cross the webbing over, and they traded webbing. So as they go through, they cross the... Now, I'm going to point out something here. If you notice on this side, the round turn was done correctly. On this side, he went over the top of the rail, but to continue going, we know that. So in this case, if that happened, the attendant would have to stop and then redo that section. Go ahead and redo this section. Rob, you keep going. So now he has to fix this. So that's what we don't want. We don't want one attendant doing it correctly and the other one doing it not correctly. But the bottom line is if you're in a hurry, if it's going to strap them in, and you're comfortable that the system is set, and you want to have somebody do a safety check to make sure that the patient's not going to fall out, you always want to safety check all your nuts to make sure that the patient is not going to fall out. So here we're going to make him redo it properly. Okay, then he's going to come over and do the diamond lash. Okay, there we go. Now we have it correct. So we have a round turn and crossover. Round turn, crossover on both sides. So even with the delay and having to rewrap, we're still going at a relatively fast pace as far as lashing them in. This is an exercise, in any situation, it's going to take you at least 5 minutes to lash somebody in. So you need to have good teamwork in doing a patient in the Stokes basket. And generally 2 people is all you need. You don't want to get too many hands involved. If you get too many hands involved in this, you're going to get all confused and it's not going to be done properly. So anytime we lash someone in the Stokes basket, we want to remove them from a roof or anything. You get 2 people, ideally, would be the fastest way of getting it in, and it takes 2 people to do this. And if you notice, we didn't lash the top strap. If you would have put the top strap of the Stokes on the patient, it would have been over the neck. We don't want to put any lashings over the patient's neck or the airway. That might interfere with the airway. And if we had the backboard in this situation, they would have been strapped in the backboard, and then they would have been diamond lashed in and the straps on top. You can always quickly buckle those, so we'd have a lot of redundancy if they were in a long backboard. Okay, as they get to the top, they're going to do a round turn at the top, and in this demonstration, to anchor it, they're going to bring it back to this rail, and then they're going to secure it. There's multiple ways that you can secure it at the end, but in this demonstration, I'm going to have them bring it back to the final rail, and then each one is going to secure to the other webbing. Okay, they're using a half hitch knot to secure it. Okay, there we go. Then let's go ahead and tilt the patient real quick. We're going to just do a quick tilt to make sure that he doesn't slide anywhere. Okay, no sliding. That looks pretty good. It looks real good. After you finish this, you want to do a quick safety check to make sure all the knots are correct. You want to have somebody verify and double check before you lower them down. And now we rig up our bridle system, and then we'll rig up our lowering system, and then we can take them down off the roof safely. And if they needed an attendant, you want to put an attendant with them. In the event that they have a problem where vomiting or anything, you can always tilt the stretcher over so that you clear the airway. And that concludes it. The demonstration on tying Stokes.